We running now?
Yeah, we're good. We're good. Good to go.
We find ourselves here in Camden in the studio yet again, Meta.
I know, but it's becoming like home, I think. And I'm enjoying every time we do one of these episodes. And this one's going to be a special one. So season 1 of the Metaforecast, episode 4.
And episode 4, and potentially season finale for season 2 of Speak Easy with Haroon. Conversations with artists, creatives, and troublemakers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the last time you and I were in a studio together, or any of the last times I ever asked you which one you actually fall under, Meta.
As a creative, troublemaker, and what was the other one?
Artist.
I think I might be the middle one. I don't know. What is there a difference between creative and artist?
I mean, that itself is a really big debate,
yeah,
isn't it? Like the distinction between these different, we're writers and poets, so you know we could sit here all day splitting hairs over that. I think for me, a lot of what we can do is art, even cooking.
Yeah,
but
true.
I think, like for me, you know, a copywriter, for example, is a creative, but they're not an artist.
Ah, okay. So you I think with artists you kind of subscribe to the idea of, like, you know, the classical forms of art.
Yeah, but I'm a walking contradiction. So I do believe that actually art can go beyond those definitions.
I believe so. I think people can be creative in fields that are seen to be more logical and more, you know, scientific. Because I think science is quite creative as well.
Yeah, but I think I use those different labels because ultimately I want to give people and guests on my podcast a little bit of choice as to how they want to self-identify. Because, for example, someone might come on the podcast and, you know, they're more of like a entrepreneur, or they might not identify as the creative or the artist, but they might just identify as a troublemaker because they're probably challenging a way of doing things within how they conduct their business. So yeah.
I mean, most creative and entrepreneurial endeavors are disruptive businesses where they kind of break the status quo of things that have been traditionally done for the past decade or so.
Yes and no. I mean, I challenge that just because a lot of what actually is the backbone of most economies is just a lot of people running businesses that aren't necessarily groundbreaking, but they just fulfill certain needs. But I think the very act of just being self-employed, being a freelancer, working for yourself, that still disrupts the expectation or the social expectation of just like go get a job, you know, work it, you know, tolerate it, come home, etc., etc. And let's just give a little bit more context to everyone who's listening and watching.
Yeah, kind of like a pseudo intro.
Yeah, let's just do a little bit of an intro because they may not have tuned into the first 3 episodes. So do you want to start with giving some context and I'll build?
Yeah, so for people watching for the first time, I'm the Metaforest. I'm a spoken word artist / creative entrepreneur, I guess. And I started the Metaforecast in order to kind of get a deeper understanding of the artists that I admire and that are emerging in the scene that I'm in.
Which scene is that?
The poetry scene in London, but hopefully across the UK and worldwide. We want that worldwide domination. But also to kind of expand upon my own knowledge by interviewing people that are probably in my life that I had no idea in regards to their industry, and then maybe kind of, you know, glean some sort of knowledge or better understanding of what they do. What about yourself?
Okay, my name is Haroon, and yeah, how you and I met was on the spoken word poetry scene in London. Yeah. I'm a poet, also a DJ. I like to make beats. I like writing poetry for stage and page. Like yourself, I'm a creative entrepreneur. So my day job, I work as a copywriter. I have my own business, so I write for other companies, particularly in technology And one of my big focuses is I love writing sort of customer success stories and case studies to help my clients turn their positive customer experiences into a story that can help them sell more. And in addition to that, what else? I set up Speak Easy with Haroon, the podcast, during the pandemic. A lot of the footage is still in the can. I haven't actually released it as of recording this. By the time this airs, season 1 will have hit. I think I definitely grappled with a lot of, I guess, procrastination, imposter syndrome, a lot of things that I've actually been overcoming a lot more. I don't think it's a coincidence, like me overcoming a lot of these challenges and starting to actually get work to the point where it's going to actually be released out into the world. To me, that definitely correlates with a period in my life where I've been leaning a lot more into community and relationships and building up like my own little circle of creatives, of which you're one. And some of the other people we've had on the podcast, such as Charney, Jody, George, and there's a lot of people who are not here today or in previous podcasts who we probably will get on our shows.
Definitely.
And the way that you and I got on the podcast, get into the studio together, was I think we figured that we could collaborate where we've got our separate podcasts, but we could do episodes together.
Yeah.
Where we could then go and take, those interviews and basically use them in our own platforms. The reason I got into podcasting is because I absolutely love people. I love people, I love creatives, and I love artists. I love having conversations and really getting into people's motivations. Like, why do they do what they do? Why have they stuck with certain things that they've done, even though there could have been maybe easier things they could have done, things with less friction, whether it's just the hardships or the knockbacks, or even just because there are other things that could have been a lot more financially viable for them.
I remember, I think one of the first times I spent time with you in a proper conversation was usually revolving around music, and we were coming back from a friend's house, and I think we were in your car and we were just kind of exchanging tunes, and then I kind of remember like, oh, there's such a vibe, but it also gave me an idea that, it reminded me that obviously people are a lot more than their job or their kind of like label, like DJ or poet and things like that. People are people. They have an amalgamation of like interests, and music is always something that's very unifying. Like, no matter where you are in the world, everyone loves music. Or if you're not an avid music lover, you do know what songs you like, and people tend to have the same will have the same likes and then bond over that. And obviously I've noticed that music for you is incredibly important to you. What do you have, one of your first memories of like music being this like important influence on your life?
I think the earliest memories are, just to give some background, I'm a British Pakistani, so born and raised here in the UK, but I guess British by nationality, but Pakistani origin. I think it was a combination of listening to, around about the age of 4 or 5, I mean it's probably earlier, but that's when I can actually remember Michael Jackson, the Thriller album, and also just a lot of old school Bollywood music. Because again, every Sunday, so I grew up in Hampshire before moving to London later in life, and every weekend we would just go to East London to like my nans and uncles and aunts, and like every weekend we would always sit and watch like the latest Bollywood movies, so there'd be music. So yeah, I think music from different cultures, but also my dad had his own business. He used to have like resale shops. Oh, cool. Like selling clothes and stuff back when I was growing up. And the radio was always on. So again, while my parents were busy working in the shop, I always sort of joked that, my third parent was the radio growing up, because I was always exposed to just lots of different sounds. And the 80s was a great time. Like, there was so much great pop coming out, and it was really diverse. So yeah, I mean, music's always been there. Just, it's always been, I think, one of the things that's always had me the most excited. But again, I love film. I think TV is going through a massive golden age right now.
Yeah, the age of streaming.
The age of streaming. There's just some incredible stories being told. And now that I'm in a place in life to sort of influence it, I also like going to the theatre. I loved reading books growing up, like creative stuff that always involved the senses and the imagination. And I think for me, I'm autistic. I wasn't even diagnosed until I was almost 40. But like growing up, I always felt quite disconnected from people.
Yeah.
Like my love of people came a lot later in life, when I sort of figured out coping mechanisms. And obviously, as you get older and you move beyond your hometown that you grew up in, you find your tribe. And that's when you can sort of flourish and thrive. But yeah, especially when I was young, where connecting with people was very difficult due to an undiagnosed condition. That world of just getting lost in Saturday, Sunday morning cartoons, reading Roald Dahl books, listening to my music on my headphones when I went to bed on a Walkman.
I love Walkmans. I went through a fair share. Like I've had like 3. Obviously they kind of break over time once you...
Walkman, Discman, mini disc players in the 90s.
I never had a mini disc though. I never got there. But as soon as I would have been able to afford one, like digital MP3 players were coming out. Do you remember the Sony, the bean looking one, and then the USB type MP3 players? Those are kind of like the cheaper ones that you could get at the time.
I don't remember.
Yeah,
but I mean, let me throw it back on you, because again, I met you in poetry in the scene, I think mid 2021.
Yeah, kind of like when I just started to headline and stuff. Yeah,
well, not just that, because we had the pandemic, the zombie apocalypse that was going on, and a guy called Abdullah, also known as Soft Spoken, who runs BYOB, Bring Your Own Bars, which is like one of the top poetry nights in London. I think he was one of the boldest and most aggressive people in just like when the world started opening up again. He was like, I'm putting events on and I'm just going to be consistent. I'm sticking my neck out. Yeah. It's a risk, and I'm just going to put events on. And I remember always spotting you from a distance, because you were always quite bubbly, quite social. I was always a little bit on the outside. And you always dressed very stylishly. And then I started seeing you on the microphone, doing a lot of poetry that was either sort of sensual love poetry. And then obviously you did a lot of 90s throwback poetry with like R&B references.
Yeah, my slow jam playlist, literally.
Your slow jam playlist poems. And again, I think I have similar memories of how I bonded with you, which was over music. So talk to me about your journey with music, sort of growing up from your earliest memories to where you're at now.
So for people that don't know, I'm Filipino, and Filipinos and music goes hand in hand. Like back home in the Philippines, people love to sing, even if they kind of quote unquote can't sing. People will sing their hearts out through karaoke.
Karaoke's really big in Southeast Asia. What's with that?
I mean, if you think about it, like music is so healing, but there's something about singing your favorite song and just having no cares or no Fs, basically. Yeah. People from where in the Philippines especially don't give a F about, how they like. Music is very healing. And yeah, like I think it's probably one of the main forms of therapy, apart from like drinking and smoking, but music and playing music. There's a lot of very good guitar players in the Philippines, self-taught. So and obviously a lot of singers. There's so many people. If you think of Filipinos, they're usually in the entertainment industry, singing or dancing. So yeah, for me, my music journey starts with my dad. You talked about Michael Jackson. I think my dad had Farewell My Summer Love, which was a tape, a compilation of like either original / covers sung by Michael Jackson. I think maybe before Off the Wall. I used to sing that a lot. And then obviously one of my favorite songs that my dad used to play when he was driving me to school was American Pie by Don McLean, which is one of my favorite artists as well. Who's a kind of like a country singer.
We were talking about that, I think, last night.
Yeah.
Or even earlier today, because I was asking you, like, is there any genre that you're not into? And I was about to touch on country, because that always seems to be the lightning rod where everyone's like, yes, you know what? I like everything but country and western. And you're like, no, man.
You gotta love country. If you think about it, it's
I love a bit of Johnny Cash.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, country is one of those genres, maybe just other than rock and roll, that touches on, like, you know, everyday man experiences. Like, it's not grandiose. Like, they don't have like mansions where they're, you know, talking about things.
So you'd say it's working class music?
I would not working class. I think everyday man. Like, it's more accessible. Like, you know, people living day-to-day lives, trying to make it through life, a 9 to 5, working in a diner, things like that, or on a ranch or whatever.
It sounds like a bit like what Bruce Springsteen's music was about.
But yeah, like American Pie was one of my favorite songs, and it's kind of like in the lane of like Bohemian Rhapsody, where it's nearly a 7-8 minute song, and it just kind of flows and blends into other genres as the song plays out, and there's a story arc, which I love. So it's about, you know, the day the music died, which is about a plane crash that killed a couple of musicians that Don McLean actually really loved. So the day that music died refers to that, but also, you know, from an audience, a listener's perspective, it can mean anything. So yeah, like there's loads of references to the time in there, and a lot of like poetic language in that song too. So yeah, and then that started off, you know, me getting my own Walkman, like we were talking about, listening to other music, firstly my dad's stuff, because that was the only stuff I could get my hands on, and then later on buying my own CDs and singles and tapes when I got my own pocket money. So yeah, that's it. And then probably is the main influence to why I write poetry, because my ideal artist at the time that I was listening to wrote in that vein, in that kind of tapestry of words, and the vernacular and the vocabulary was just so different to what people my age were speaking at the time. So I just kind of like had that infatuation with words from that age.
And then didn't you went on and did a English literature degree?
Yeah, I did. So I did English literature from A-level to uni, with creative writing, same as Shani. I think it was the only subject I was good at, and I didn't know what to do with it. I was good at science as well, but I was further down in like maths and English at the time in year 7. But then as I got better in English and maths, I was in top set. Yeah, top set science, and they kind of all just evened out to like, you know, intermediate level. But also the reason why I got better in English is because I had a crush on my English teacher at the time, and I just wanted to impress her. But if it weren't for that, I guess would be the reason why I'm so good at English, because she inspired me so. And probably my love poetry, because I was probably fawning for the longest time. But yeah, I mean, with you, did you find the idea of like, you know, manipulating the English language in the same way? Or?
So I had a really rough and bumpy journey with the English language. I mean, on one hand, when I was 5, I won some prize for being like the best reader in class. Mm. Again, it must have been the autism, and I've also got ADHD, where I would just, every time they used to bring the catalogue of Penguin books, my parents, one thing they would do is they would let me get as many books as I wanted, and I'd just devour them. But then, you know, I sort of switched schools a fair bit, and one of my teachers, was highly unsupportive of the stories I wrote, because I used to put like, I would sometimes have a recurring character, and he hated the recurring character.
Oh, wow.
This teacher actually said in front of the class, he said, if we could just remove Haroon from the class would be 20 times better. Mm. And then when I was sort of 12, I moved. My mum sort of took me out of school and took me to Pakistan for a few years. And the first school I was in, very quickly, I got put into advanced after school writing classes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I dropped out because I absolutely hated the classes. Simply because there was a lot of people who were just using language in a way that felt like just masturbation.
In what sense?
Just everyone's using fancy words, you know.
I understand.
I have no idea what this.
They're more decorative.
Yes, it was very. I felt like it was very ego driven and very decorative.
Yeah.
And I couldn't relate to that, and so again, I kind of stumbled along with language and had a very up and down relationship with English and with writing. And then sort of mid-90s, a friend of mine got me into Tupac, and that was cool. But it wasn't until I was 17, in about 1998, someone played me Eric B. and Rakim. They played me KRS-One, some Naughty by Nate. Like basically old school hip-hop. I was hooked. When I moved back to England in 1998, I just started buying up things like Outkast albums, Gang Starr albums, became a hip-hop fanatic. And I think I loved the way that rappers use language. So I started writing poems, rhymes, anything creative. You know, my incredibly bad relationship with formal education continued. Flunked out my A-levels. Went to a really, really bad uni that I won't name. You know, dropped out of there, spent a year in the wilderness. Then I went to university in Portsmouth. I studied business because that's what I did at A-levels, because I kind of came from a family where everything was geared around employability. And originally my family wanted me to study the sciences to go be a doctor. And so, you know, my negotiation and my win was to get them down from that to let me do like business, economics and IT. And even then, never fully enjoyed it. Like at university, the thing that I did the most was I actually worked on the university magazine, first as a writer, then as like one of the deputy editors. And I got to interview artists. And I just kept writing, and then I sort of stopped writing and everything. I think around about when uni finished, I couldn't figure out how to earn a living from writing. You know, journalism didn't pay, and I actually then went on a crazy odyssey, an arranged marriage, which ended spectacularly badly. And so, you know, I was writing from about the age of 17, 18 to about 24. And then I took another hiatus while I was married, and I went, you know, did my master's, worked in business for many years in tech startups. And it was only when marriage ended, to be honest, around about the time when my marriage was just circling the drain, I was getting back into writing, and all of a sudden I felt like the universe was starting to throw people into my life who were like writers, poets, and on the day of my 36th birthday, I did my first open mic in like well over a decade at Word on the Street in Old Street, which was run by Kingpin and Shady. And that was a legendary night. I mean, I met people like I might have met George there. I definitely met Timo.
Oh wow!
Who's a poet and artist from Leeds that we were out with the other night. I met Sarah Callahan. You know, and that was interesting because, you know, Sarah was only just starting to dip her feet into poetry, but she'd been doing comedy for like well over a decade. And so that was my journey. Mine's been a real meandering one where I'm what Julia Cameron, the author of The Artist's Way, refers to as a recovering artist. Julia Cameron's work has been really influential, I think, especially since lockdown, in terms of just helping me, I guess, recover as an artist. Because even in the first 3 years when I was writing and starting to perform, once my marriage ended, I still grappled with just doing day jobs.
Yeah.
I really grappled with having to be in one, switch into a certain mentality for work and then switch off from that when I got home and then switch into being an artist and a creative. Those two things were very jarring and I struggled with them. And then even before the pandemic happened, I'd made a decision to go self-employed and freelance.
Probably like one of the best decisions you've made.
Easily the best. So I retrained as a copywriter, and I've been thinking about it even in 2019. But at the time, I think I was running out of shift work because I took a break from working in startups just to do shift work because I needed something that was
manageable in time.
Manageable. I mean, in theory, manageable. In theory. But also, I just wanted to basically stay in London because my daughter was still living in London with my ex-wife. This creative community that I'd found through poetry and music was something that I wanted to stay near to. And yeah, I got offered another job at a startup. And so I didn't get into copywriting straight away until 2020. And then, a pandemic happened and it was a good decision. It was a struggle.
Yeah.
It still is a struggle being freelance and being self-employed, but
I'm learning that too.
Yeah, and we touched upon that I think in our first podcast together when we had George Lawrence in here as well, who's a freelancer. But I think for me, when I looked at something like copywriting, I just felt like, man, if someone had told me this in my 20s, when I was looking around and going, you can't really make money from being a journalist because it's just it's like a hard profession to break into, and the financial rewards are not there.
And there's also political stuff going on where you have to kind of, depending who you're writing for, to be fair. Yeah,
no, definitely. There's all those sorts of things to consider. You might end up having to work for a publication where you're not politically aligned with them.
Yeah.
And so, for me, I think from the pandemic onwards, having a bit more control of my time, not necessarily making as much money as I used to, but I think I told myself that I could probably redress that and probably even improve on my financial situation over time by sticking at one thing. But it's allowed me to do a lot more artistic and creative projects. The only thing that I've struggled with has been that sense of not being good enough, which is why the first season of my podcast sat in a can for up to 18 months. I'm hoping to bring my first. Well, I say hoping. Let's just be more clear. Ready, I'm releasing my first book of poetry this year, and that's been 6 years in the making.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about your podcast, the first one. Like, what do you want people to get from the first one? Because it was in a state.
The first season that was recorded in 2021.
Yeah, because it was recorded when the pandemic was going on, but also it was also a new chapter in your life. And like, what did you want listeners to get from, this first season?
That's a really good question. It's not something I actively thought about.
Yeah.
But I think as you're asking the question, the gears were just turning in my head. I think the one thing I want people to take away from it is reinvention.
I love that.
I've honestly felt like the last 6 years of my life, and it is actually coming up to like 6 years when I made a bunch of decisions to change things up. It's been about reinvention. One bit at a time, I figured certain things out. I went in harder on working in startups and in more senior and stressful positions, more money. I went the other way. I did shift work. Then I went back to doing stuff in an office. And then, sort of freelance and being self-employed. And within that, over time, I've gone from just being on stage as a poet and being very shy and very awkward to becoming far more confident. And I think I credit Neurospace, which is a collective of autistic theatre professionals. I spent time with them towards the end of 2021 and the beginning of 2022, and then that culminated in some theatre performances, and that really got me into the zone of performing. But over that time, I've started playing around on things like Logic on my Mac and making beats.
Which are awesome, by the way.
Yeah,
Go get a beat from Haroon.
I need to spend more time doing that, because again, with ADHD, I go through periods where I'm just making beats all the time during a month or two, and then I just don't touch it, and then I sort of go back to it. But in all these things, I think, especially with something like podcasting is a form of reinvention for me, because it's me doing something very DIY, very myself, and I think taking my own destiny into my own hands. I mean, I felt supremely dissatisfied working for other people for the longest time, and I think a friend of mine and also my therapist, they started jabbing me in recent years, just before 2020 and the pandemic hit, and they basically said, look, I think you're only going to be really happy when you're calling the shots and you're your own boss, without even actively curating it that way. 3 of the 4 guests are people whose stories massively hinge on reinvention. You've got Sophia Bennett, who used to be a management consultant.
Oh, wow.
Worked at McKinsey in the city, and then, did a 180 and she answered the call of and the yearning of her heart to be an author, and went and became an author. And we've got David Young, who's someone who, he was a screenwriter. He wrote for TV. He wrote for, Biker Grove.
Oh, I used to watch that.
He wrote for, Channel 4, like Brookside.
I remember that too.
And then he just turned around and decided, I don't want to write for the screen anymore. And he became, a YA novelist. We've got, Tom Hall, who used to be a rapper, but then focused all his energies on basically being a graphic designer. And what's interesting is I have to get him in the studio again at some point, because his journey's evolved. So a lot of what was going on in that journey was, I can't remember the name of the studio. There was a design studio that he spent years constantly getting knockbacks before he got employed by them. And, they do a lot of work for like Nike and so forth. And now he works for Rockstar Games as a designer. So that, I want to get him on just to even talk about that transition. The thing that I want people to take away is reinvention. I think we're living in a time where we're constantly going to have to keep pivoting and readapting ourselves. And I want people to be unafraid to do that. And I think for me, even though I ended up taking the plunge and recording the episodes, I was so self-critical of my interview style, the episodes, all those sorts of things, and very self-aware of how my ADHD and autism manifests. But I think now partly I'm learning to let go. And I think also partly I'm a little more confident because I've just learned more about my condition, or, overlapping conditions, and just how to sort of navigate relating to people, talking and communicating. So it's been a bit of a journey, but I think, podcasting is something that, I love and adore. I've got this curiosity about people, and I love to talk to people, to get them to open up and talk. And I think I've got I think it's honed from my time as a journalist. I loved interviewing artists, and I got to interview some legends. Like I interviewed Roots Maneuver, Master Ace, Ty, Roy Ayers, just some absolute incredible artists. And I think for me, podcasting is like an evolution of that, at least for me.
Actually, this is something that people don't really know about me, but I think after uni, my friend Edgar Clips, shout out to Edgar, started his own online music magazine called Set Off Mag. So I interviewed a singer called Tom Kane, who's actually been in one rap battle in the UK league. There was an artist called 11 who did a cover of a song. I can't remember the name of the song. The one, the song that goes "Been Around the World."
Lisa Stansfield.
Yeah, so basically her dad used to play that song because he went on one date with Lisa Stansfield, and she ended up, kind of using that as a template for her song at the time. But I can't find the song anymore. Maybe she took it down.
That's like another parallel that you and I share. Yeah. Another one of the driving reasons for me not going into journalism was, and I think it comes down to the independent spirit of wanting to do my own thing. I didn't want to have to end up in a position where I would have to interview people that I wasn't really that interested in, or that I didn't really want to have to sort of deal with. I didn't want it to, call me naive, I just didn't want it to feel like a job. I just feel like, I think back then, I get it. Like if you're a publication, a publication is in a set geography, there's a set audience. You've got to then go after the artists or just individuals that they find interesting. I think what the internet has done is it's just blown things wide open.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you don't have to worry anymore about just an audience in one place. You can aggregate interest from here, and you can have an audience of people that would be like, there's an audience for almost anything now on the internet.
Yeah.
And so what I like about podcasting is, if I was working for like a magazine or a TV channel or something, there's people that I've interviewed and that I'll interview that they'll be like, no. But I think there are stories that are worth telling. And also I feel that some of the people that I interview, their profile, where it will be, in a certain number of years. I mean, just looking at Tom All, the graphic designer who's gone from, I think he was working at I Love Dust is the name of the studio, her incredible studio, but then going to a whole nother level, working for Rockstar Games, and being able to put his unique stamp on things as a designer. Like, yeah, that for me, that's probably my first example of seeing someone who's already gone and elevated since I interviewed them. So I think there's something about the podcasting platform and just using the internet where you can take those guests, you can take those punts. You can take a leap of faith that I know I'm a curator. And I think for me, that's one of the golden things. I love curating.
I wanted to also touch on, and then I'll go back on curating, this idea of reinvention. Like, I don't think there's an age limit to, starting something new.
Yes, this is something that I feel very strongly about.
Because obviously in 2018 I left my office job to work in email marketing for a few months. You
don't mind me asking, how old were you then, Meta?
I think 2018. How many years ago was that now? So about 5 years ago. So I was like maybe 29, 30, no, 31, 32.
Yeah, so you were 31 when you embarked on Reinvention. I was just before my 36th birthday. So
yeah,
and there are people who do it even later.
The thing is like, there's so many things in the world. You can do everything. No, you can do anything. You just can't do everything. So the idea of the time that you're allotted, like, just pick something, run with it, and see where you go. I
do think more than ever we're moving away from the sort of industrial revolution model of you can only be one thing.
Yeah, especially when you're coming from like an immigrant family. Like, they, like, for Filipinos, like, they're very loyal to their job. Like, the first job you get is the one you get a pension from, usually. And I think recently I'm seeing a lot more entrepreneurs, as the generations go on. And also I think when it comes to coming over to countries like the UK or the US or any European country where, immigrant families are migrating to earn money and send back, there's this almost imposter syndrome baked in. Because obviously as you move up in certain spaces, you're going to see less brown, black, cream, beige, purple, green faces. You're just going to see a lot of white faces, and then you tend to question your position. almost, and that's where we get the imposter syndrome from sometimes. But I always say that the only imposter is the syndrome.
Yeah, I love that. Every time I've been grappling with it, you've always sort of set me straight and said the only imposter is the syndrome itself.
Yeah.
Do you want to build on that?
I think I had it a lot in the office workspace, especially when I came from a team where I was managing the only other two people of color when everyone else was white. And just feeling the friction of me and my team just navigating through this like Eurocentric workspace where business and office culture, when it comes to like socializing, revolved around, you know, your Eurocentric sensibilities of like alcohol and food, where there may be some restrictions depending on what culture you're from. So I had someone that was Muslim that can drink, and I had someone that was
and they've got to keep halal, they can't eat pork and so forth
as well. And then I had another person that was like more religious, you know, in terms of like Christianity, and I don't know what denomination, but even though they could drink, they didn't want to drink too much, and they were more aware of like, you know, moving in a certain way, especially in the office. I think when you're a person of color, I think you have to be a little bit more reserved, because I think from my experience, white people get away with things more in the office.
Yeah.
You get a little bit more slack. Whereas if you're a person of color that's a bit more outspoken, I think there's more ego in terms of making your higher ups look more idiotic, especially if you're showing them up in front of everyone, and things like, you know, being seen as like the aggressive person or someone without culture, even though we have all the culture in the world.
It's interesting because I definitely found that the older that I got, that if I was quite intense and passionate, and I'm generally quite a passionate person, I think the intensity again comes from my autism. You know, in a lot of white spaces, I'd be accused of being, you know, the angry, the aggressive, whatever. Whereas a lot of times other people, like white people, could get away with just saying the wildest, most prejudiced. I will not name the company that I worked at,
Obviously.
but I remember one time where I think in Ilford, it was a South Asian, I think they were divorced, man and woman.
Yeah.
And there was a domestic violence incident. I think the woman had gotten with another guy after they divorced. I think the guy had murdered her with a crossbow, or just something. It was bad. And I was in the office, and just two white people were like, well, because I was working late, and they just said it while I was there in front of me. They just said, well, you know how it is with these people and in their culture, you know, like the honor killings and stuff. And I was just like, wow, you felt that comfortable to talk that way. I mean, at the same company, I remember going to lunch, and there was a white woman who said to me, asked me what my name was, and I was like, it's Haroon. And she literally said, can I call you something else that's easier, please? Okay. This was later in my journey where I was just becoming even less comfortable.
Yeah, but we didn't have at the time I didn't have a name for it. Like, I didn't know what I was experiencing, and these were the things I was experiencing. Yeah. But when you don't have a label for something, you don't know how to bring it up to your manager or your line manager, and then people just think you're being difficult, especially if you're...
Yeah, I mean, I think the office is a very particular type of space, because I spent my teens working in retail, both my family business and also working in sort of other sort of retail jobs. And I sometimes did a little bit of that in my 20s as well. I'm not saying it's a perfect space, but I didn't encounter that. And then like from my mid-20s right till about hitting 30, I was sort of semi-self-employed. Like I basically got involved in my family's business. And that was a retail business. And that was, again, a lot more informal. It was only when I graduated from my master's that I started having to sit and work in offices and just realize, oh my God, I'm not built for this. like, for all my sins, I needed a job after I graduated with my master's, and I broke one of my ethical rules. I worked for a gambling company, which lasted all of 2 months. It was such a toxic environment. Like, it was quite misogynistic. And again, no one was calling anything out. It was just the norm. Even a lot of the women who worked, they just played along with it. And it's interesting because I had a little exchange on LinkedIn with the guy who was kind of like my line manager before I moved on from there. And I think he sort of looked back and reflected and said, yeah, I look back now and I realise it was a bit of a toxic environment. And to be honest, many other office environments that I worked in were quite abusive. Not always along racial or gender lines, but just people exercising power, expecting a lot, poor boundaries, making you work late, and just a lot of shouting and swearing if you didn't get things done.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said, by the time I got to sort of 20, like now, I don't think, like, it would be very difficult for me to go back and work in an office 9 to 5 for someone. I think increasingly my disaffection with sort of working for other people sort of reached its peak. And here I am working for myself. Not easy. I do think that it will come good over time, but just striving like yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, how about you? Like, you talked about leaving your job in retail.
Yeah.
To working in email marketing, but then we never heard about the rest of the journey of sort of transitioning from working for others right through to being self-employed.
So I think I actually took a copywriting course. This was like just before leaving Selfridges and then going to the email marketing place. And I couldn't really I didn't know, because I wasn't in the community of copywriters. I didn't know how to get work. So while I was in email marketing, not realizing that it wasn't for me, but not realizing that I didn't know what was next for me. So I think after I left the email marketing place, I carried on my copywriting course because I hadn't finished it. And then I did end up going back to retail for a bit just to make ends meet. But the place I was at it was closing down in December 2019. So going into 2020, which is the year of the pandemic, I already had this idea of like going to poetry events. So I think I went to at least 1 or 2 BYOB poetry events as an audience member. It was just basically just finding ways to pass the time as an unemployed person, just because I was kind of drifting, and I was really drifting. I felt lost. And then something changed. I think everyone has their own pandemic story, but the poets that I've followed from the first 2 BYOB events decided to do poetry online on Instagram Live on the open mic. And obviously there was nothing going on physically, so I just spent my hours just watching lives, listening to other people's poetry. And then I decided to share my own. And it was kind of like a stepping stone, because I think for me, I'm not very good at public speaking. I'm getting better though, every year. And basically, like, reciting poetry in your bedroom is less scary than getting up on stage and reciting poetry. So it took literally baby steps. As the lockdown was ending and we were coming back into real life events, I had already amassed like a following and kind of a reputation online. So I decided to take the leap and just perform, live. And then within, I think, a few months, I got my first headline at Shits and Scribbles. And then again at BYOB in October with Odd Socks. And I felt that was amazing. But in and between those 2 headlines, like, I was doing my own poetry videos out of boredom creatively, and just I had one person. My first client was Danny Martin, shout out to Danny, who asked me to do a video for him because he saw that I was doing videos for myself. And yeah, he was like, I want this done with this, and I want to do it over this song. I was like, cool, I could do that, and I'll pay you this much. I was like, okay. So I did it, and then he was like, oh, can you do this to the audio? And I was like, oh, I can teach you how to do that. And I told him, and then he was like, no, I want you to do it. And I was like, okay. And he paid me for that as well. So a light bulb moment happened when I thought, maybe I should do this for a living. So obviously during the pandemic and coming back into events, I was always filming. I was filming events when I was not even a poet at BYOB. And Abdullah's told me so many times, like, who's this guy at the front that's just filming our events? I didn't know what I was going to do with it, actually. I kind of thought, like, I've always wanted a YouTube channel, but I felt the easiest way was just to record people and have that as content rather than me be in front of the camera, because I was finding it hard to be in front of the camera as well. And then, like, my whole channel was built on my phone. And as I got more people inquiring about videos, I decided to just, take the plunge and use my camera for work. So I only started, I think, last year as a self-employed person, but the beginnings of that happened in 2020 and 2021, just from the interest of people seeing what I was doing for myself. And I think reinvention comes in unexpected ways, where just doing what you love opens opportunities. So I think definitely anything that interests you, you should definitely pursue it, because you don't know where it can go, and it can branch off into other things. You can learn other skill sets through this one love. So from this love of, like, doing video, I've gotten to know a little bit about audio, a little bit about lighting, and then obviously through those experiences you meet people that are on the same journey as you, maybe at different levels of experience, but you kind of help each other along the way. Same with poetry as well. I'm still learning, but as I meet more of you guys through the scene, I'm learning myself as to what it is to be a good performer as well. Yeah, in terms of my journey as a self-employed person, I think it comes from passion, then experience, then, getting the actual qualifications, which is, doing the thing in real life, in real time. You can study something from the first page to the back, but to put it into practice is something different. I think you can be aware of potential things that could go wrong, but the only time that you'll remember them is when you make a mistake and that mistake sticks with you. So the reason why people learn from their mistakes is because they know how harrowing it is and they don't want to repeat them. So mistakes make lessons more memorable. So that's why I think being a self-employed person, working for yourself, is beneficial, because you'll find different parts of yourself unlocked, and it's not about you're not that person. You're just not that person yet.
You're growing into yourself. Yeah,
you're growing into yourself. Everyone has potential. Everyone does not have potential. Everyone has potential to be something great. It's not that they're not great. It's that they're not great yet. And I think you only get to grow into yourself through time. So yes, you can do anything, but because we're mortal, we can't do everything. By picking things you like, you are consistently finding out what you like and what you don't like, and then that forms you as a person over time.
What have been some of your challenges sort of navigating being a freelancer?
Communicating with clients would be one. Setting expectations, managing them, troubleshooting things. I think as someone, finding their way through a certain craft, you are scared to ask questions. You're scared to, let people know that you're making a mistake. But I think if you're transparent enough, there's a bit of forgiveness, because I think people know, if people know you're just starting out, you manage that expectation as well, that you're learning and you're growing into your field. I think also safeguarding yourself from, because not every client is going to be your ideal client. I think there are people that want to get more out of you,
but they want to get more out of you than what they've agreed to pay.
Yeah,
on a particular job. Like, scope creep is a very big challenge as a freelancer.
My brother brought that up, that as a term. Scope creeping is a thing.
Yeah, it's a common term just in projects and project management, where you have to really define the scope.
That's why as you grow and you upscale, I think contracts are important.
You'll remember I spent 5 to 6 months chasing someone for money, and I was very lucky because I had some
paperwork.
No, I didn't have paperwork. I had a relationship.
Oh yeah.
Let's just say that I had relationships with certain people who were able to broker something between me and said client, and I got my money. But I think what it's taught me is this year definitely has to be more contract based.
Yeah.
Again, I know certain people who've never done contracts just because they've had really great relationships with people. I mean, again, I've got certain clients where, if the scope moves, they just pay me more.
As you find out who's not your client, your ideal client, then it literally saves you time, because you kind of see the red flags early on when you see other clients. It's just the way they ask questions, or the way they are in the beginning. You have to kind of calculate the risk, and then set your price accordingly to those risks. I think reputation is important as well. I think word of mouth is probably underrated. I think if someone really likes your work, they'll ask about you.
Yeah.
And if it's coming from someone that they respect, that has worked with you, then that increases tenfold, because they're asking that person because they like that person's work. And for them to like your work means so much more than any advert, any flyer can communicate. How about for you?
I think the main challenge is just what I've found working as a copywriter is it wildly varies. Like, some clients don't understand how much input they need to give. So it's not like I can just write things and magic them out of thin air. Like, sometimes they need to give me access to customers so I can talk to them, so I can do research for like tone of voice and customer voice data. Sometimes it's just needing input for a client to really tell me more about their business, who their customer is. And I think the challenge I've had with certain clients is sometimes the clients can't fully articulate what their value proposition is. Like, what is it that makes their company different?
Yeah.
Who is it they're serving? So I think sometimes that can be a big challenge with clients, is they don't seem to actually realize how much work needs to be done. And sometimes that means rescoping the project and the price, because it's not just then words I have to write. There's a whole bunch of other work and discovery to sort of figure out what's the value proposition. What is it that they're really selling? Because, you could be selling mattresses, but really you're not selling a mattress, you're selling a good night's sleep. And I think not enough clients look at what they've got. Like, clients be like, well, we've got this really cool technology, it does this, it does that, and it can work in this and work in that. And it's like, how can we sort of get focused? So, there are those challenges. I think also what's really difficult is, again, it sort of widely varies. Like, I've had instances where potential clients and me haven't worked together because they don't seem to understand the value of the work. Like, even in the times when I wasn't charging a whole lot when I first started out, people would be like, nope, sorry, can't pay that. I'll get my wife to go and write it. I think one of the big challenges with copywriting is, unlike plumbing or video, everyone thinks they can write and they can't. Like, with plumbing, people know I need to go get a plumber to go fix that backed up toilet, or to go fix the radiator. Even with video, people know, okay, I can't just point this camera. I don't know how to do sound. I don't know how to do lighting. I can't edit. I can't sync up. I need to go get someone to go do it. Even then, I'd argue they're challenges. Like when you and I have worked on certain projects, you know, we've shot the footage, and people have asked for like ridiculous things in the edit with no understanding that what we're giving them in the edit is a function and a byproduct of what they instructed us to shoot. You can't direct us to shoot X, Y, Z and to have, you know, certain segments go a certain way and then think that somehow, you know, we're just going to chop it into a million pieces and resequence it. Like you're challenged, you know, or you're constrained by what the client has given you.
Yeah.
You get that in video. But with writing, I think sometimes clients don't know the value. I think sometimes the other challenge is that they're not in the greatest position to judge how good the copy is. You know, I've been in instances where sometimes, you know what, it's stuff I can't even go into because I'd get into trouble. Like, I've been paid now. But you'd be shocked at what happens with certain clients. I think one big challenge, particularly if you're someone who's come into this craft during the pandemic and you've been self-employed, clients will rehire you, and that's great. But I think it's not so much challenge of a copywriter, but I think if you're freelance and you haven't gone and worked for someone, you haven't had a boss going over you who knows about copy, who's been knocking your copy into shape, where you get lots of that time. So are you getting better? That's a really difficult one to judge. I've been very lucky. I've joined a recent copywriting community called The Fix, which is headed up by a couple of copywriters called Glenn Fisher and Nick O'Connor. And they've got like decades of experience between them, probably about 2 to 3 decades between the two of them. And, you know, their writing has been responsible for tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars generated. In fact, I'm actually missing a live session to record this podcast today. But, you know, submitting copy to them or watching other people submit copy has helped me understand how to get better. But I think the big challenge is that prior to that, and that's been a very recent thing because I'm in my 4th year now of freelancing, I haven't been able to know if I'm getting better. I think obviously you can take, like I'm starting to invest a lot more in courses and education from the best just because I've made a bit more money now, so I can spend money to make more money. Like in the beginning, you just had to work with what you could, a lot of free resources, but now I'm investing in, business workshops, goal setting workshops. Still haven't been able to afford one-to-one coaching, but I'll probably do some one-to-one mentoring with a more senior copywriter soon. Yeah, I think the big challenges just come from the fact that you're doing it on your own. And yes, you get feedback from the market, people take on your work and people pay your invoices. But I think with copywriting in particular, you can keep getting paid, but you may not necessarily get better. There is something about having other people more experienced give feedback. But that's, you know, again, every time I meet a challenge, I think this is one of the interesting things with self-employed life, is every time you meet a challenge, you find a way to overcome it.
Yeah.
Because things aren't being sort of fed to you by an employer, you have to do it yourself. But then also you have the freedom to, because sometimes, you know, you can be in an employed situation where you want to improve, you want to do X, Y, Z, but the employer just has you there to do that thing that they want you to do.
Do you find that you have to wear multiple hats?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to wear multiple hats. I mean, at the moment, one of the things that I'm definitely realizing is I need more help on the business side. Like, I've been quite fortunate. I've got the clients that I've got. But like anything, I am ambitious. I have certain financial goals. Also, because, you know, the other part of my life is being an artist. I want to make more money so that I can basically do bigger projects and take more risks on myself artistically, while also, you know, paying rent, making sure that there's food in the fridge, all those sorts of things. And so, yeah, I find myself having to sort of, I think you have to find ways to solve problems for yourself. And I think you have to sort of bet on yourself. And that's actually something that came up in one of my podcasts with the artist Tom Hall. He actually said that, bet on your friends. And I would sort of say, yes, definitely bet on your friends, especially when they're creatives and artists. And I've done a lot of that. I think we've done a lot of that in our relationship.
Yeah.
Where you're my go-to guy for editing, videography. Like, I would rather bet on you than a stranger. But I think what 2023 is about for me, it's about betting on myself.
I agree, yeah.
And investing more time in myself. So I'm definitely trying to work more, because even though I've got a master's in business, a lot of that is more about working for someone else. The skills needed to drum up business when you're working for yourself is completely different. So yeah, there's working on my craft, as a copywriter, and then there's the business side. So yeah, there's wearing a lot of hats, and I'm still sort of growing into it. The first 2 years were particularly rough due to the pandemic.
Yeah.
I think last year things started giving way, more clients and more projects. I think this year is about getting better, both at what I do and actually at marketing myself. And then hopefully making more money and just year on year improving. And then also just hopefully looking at other skill sets. 4 words. Everything.
You just said the first one. No?
Everywhere. All at once. 5 words.
Amazing film. Amazing film.
And the first time I saw it with you in the cinema.
Yeah, it was at the Odeon, which I've not been in the Odeon in a while. The seats were amazing. They're like this wide. Like, I never felt anything so luxurious in my life.
It was...
The ticket price was mad though. But yeah.
Let's not get into that. I might end up with PTSD just having to acknowledge that I spent that much just to watch a movie.
I mean, but if you're going to spend that much on a ticket for a movie, that's the right movie to watch, to pay for.
The last time I had an experience like that watching a movie was The Matrix, when it first came out in the 90s.
Oh my God, that was mind-blowing.
It was so good.
It was so good. Yeah, I mean, it can't be replicated. You can't replicate what The Matrix did to you in terms of like bending your mind. Like,
no, but what I felt was that everything, everywhere, all at once, I felt like I had another one of those experiences.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree.
It was that experience again. Like, it was just so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a film that you could watch again for sure.
Yeah, no, I watched it a second time around. This time with, I watched it with my partner. I needed her to see it, and she absolutely loved it. Loved it. I actually found myself crying and weeping the second time I saw it.
What's Lucy like when it comes to movies and music? Does she have the same passion?
So my partner, huge music fan.
Mm-hmm.
Huge music fan. Loves a lot of stuff from the 90s because we're of a similar age. We're in our 40s, so that was an era where we sort of grew up with a lot of music. She's more into TV and books than film.
Okay, interesting.
An absolute voracious reader. But anyways, we watched Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
Watched it a second time around, but again, I think for me that the pivotal thing was the first time when I saw it. I saw it with you. There wasn't really that much hype at the time. Like all I knew was that there was definitely it was gonna be off the wall.
Yeah,
I'd seen the trailer. I've been a huge Michelle Yeoh fan since growing up.
Yeah, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yeah, I mean, she's done a lot of sort of Hong Kong action movies,
yeah.
Jackie Chan movies. And over the years, she's just been doing her thing.
Star Trek as well. Star Trek Discovery. She was in that.
Yeah, I hated Star Trek Discovery.
I mean,
are we gonna get into that?
We can do. As a Star Trekker, I mean, Discovery leaves. It's not up to par. It's not Strange New Worlds. Strange New Worlds is entirely better in terms of the Star Trek vibe. And
so I'm not going to claim to be. I love Star Trek, but for someone who likes Star Trek, like I have certain friends who've watched every episode of Voyager, every Deep Space Nine, all of the next generation.
Watch Deep Space Nine. That's the best one. Like,
so me, I've kind of dipped in and out over the years because like I love the originals. I watched them with my father. I've watched the movies.
Okay. Yeah.
I think fundamentally, what I dislike about Discovery is it's angry and it's very violent. Yeah. It's not Star Trek. Star Trek is about Star Trek is fundamentally about non-violence to an extent, or it's the last resort. Whereas Discovery, it feels like it's a recruitment ad for joining the military.
I feel Discovery is more. It's a shadow. It's pale in comparison to the other series, but basically it was like Paramount's attempt to kind of make Star Trek cool. It was already cool as it was,
but you don't need to. Like Star Trek has such a huge audience globally that you could easily just do stuff. Stick to what it is and not stray away. And I'm not saying do the same stuff, because they touched on so many themes over the decades, over the various iterations. But fundamentally, if you're going to, like, if they had just made it a show that wasn't Star Trek and they just did that, fine, I'd be okay with it.
But as a Star Trek branded show, no, it pales in comparison. Though
I couldn't get into Picard either. I think that's garbage.
That's in the kind of the same vein, but definitely I think the right course correction, it would be to watch Strange New Worlds.
So Strange New Worlds, I've not sat down and watched it yet. I tried to sit down and watch it. I wasn't in the right headspace, but watching it felt like, okay, this was a lot more. It's not copying the Next Generation.
There's a lot more hope in there.
Yeah, I think it's about hope. Like when you watch the Next Generation, it's still from an era where people wrote good dialogue. Like I was having this discussion with, of all people, have you heard of Nutty P?
Yeah,
who's a producer. He's he's a screenwriter. He's a rapper, singer.
He's an amazing singer.
He's an amazing artist.
Yeah,
an amazing human being. Shout out to him and his partner Selena of Lunar Legacy.
Congratulations, Selena.
Well, the due date is drawing.
Yeah,
I think by
the time this comes out, the baby would be born by then?
Yes. The due date is, I think, next week, Saturday. But going back to Nutty P and me, we were having this whole chat about dialogue.
Yeah.
And we had different takes on it. Like he felt that dialogue was perhaps more eloquent back in the day, and that dialogue is a lot more short and truncated because we have like tech speak and technology and the way that language is, I don't want to say evolved, but it's changed, definitely. And I disagree. I feel like dialogue was a lot more subtle back in the day, and you see that in things like The Next Generation, whereas you watch something like Discovery, everything's on the nose. And I get that TV shows are a bit more chatty. Like TV shows sit somewhere between theatre and film. Like film is a very moving image thing, and you don't have people talking for huge amounts of time.
Yeah.
And then theatre is all about dialogue. So I get TV sits in the middle and people are going to talk.
Yeah.
But even when you look at things like The Wire, Breaking Bad, there's an economy with the way that language is used. And I feel like when you go into things like Discovery, and again, even just a lot of modern TV shows, it's on the nose. It's almost soapbox like, and people are kind of
It's always about the thing that the episode is about. I think it leaves very little way for
Yeah.
the characters to be discovered more.
Yeah.
Like just the way, like it doesn't feel natural
Yeah.
on screen. It's just too orchestrated, you know.
It's like dialogue has a function. I think you're not supposed to explain everything through dialogue.
Yeah,
You should let the audience discover things. It's exposition. But again, we sort of went off on this tangent. So yeah, Everything Everywhere All at Once. All I knew was there's this mad trailer. It's Michelle Yeoh. And I had a feeling. I just had a feeling about the movie. And I remember the amount of times that I kept sort of just like jabbing you and in the cinema and going, oh my God, did you see that? Oh my God, this, that. The thing is, I love film. Doesn't mean I've watched every single film. Like I've got certain friends who are cinephiles and they've seen everything under the sun. But pretty much every weekend I used to go to the cinema. When I was in college, when I was at uni, what ended up happening was I always had some friend or the other who worked at the cinema, so I got in for free.
You're a very lucky guy.
I'm convinced I spent more time in the cinema than I did in lecture theatres and lecture halls at university in my undergrad. I absolutely love film. And I think because the landscape has changed so much, like I feel like more than ever, film is dictated by big blockbusters, reboots, sequels, franchises, which have their place. Like for me, it's about balance. And Everything Everywhere All at Once, it was this wonderful reminder of just how much, what an assault on the senses film and cinema can be.
Do you have a bucket list of films, and I was saying this to music as well, and albums you have not yet watched or listened to?
Okay, so film.
Yeah,
there's a bucket list, and it would change on any given day. I mean, I think Asian cinema is still some of the best cinema in the world. I think no one beats South Korea for cinema. There's heaps of stuff I've yet to see. That I've just not gotten around to, just because, again, with ADHD, my attention splinters, I've got my own I think one of the biggest challenges I've had to basically being able to find time, and it's counterintuitive because someone like Julia Cameron says you need to find time to experience other people's art. You have to fill the well in order for you to make stuff. But I found it just harder as I'm making my own stuff to find time to sort of watch stuff. South Korea has great stuff. Japanese cinema is still good. Chinese mainland has a lot. Hong Kong cinema is dead due to the political situation between mainland China and Hong Kong. Taiwan's been emerging, putting out good cinema. So there's heaps that I can't even remember or name. I think in the West, in terms of things that I haven't seen, for someone who not just claims to, but I do love cinema, there's massive gaps. I still haven't seen Citizen Kane. I haven't seen The French Connection.
I've not either.
With Gene Hackman. There's... I think that's something that we should probably correct, especially with George and Jodie sitting down, because... films-wise, God, I think there's a lot of stuff from the classic golden era that I've just not seen, that I would love to basically go sit down and watch. I actually don't think I've watched... I want to watch The Conversation, which is also a Gene Hackman movie.
Oh, cool.
It's about surveillance and stuff like that. There's heaps. In terms of music, bucket lists, things that I haven't listened to, it's not about albums. It's just about finding time to sit down without the crushing pressure of capitalism and paying bills, especially in this cost of living crisis that we're in right now. And I would like to just be able to sit down and listen uninterrupted to jazz artists, people like Duke Ellington. I want to hear more of their catalogue. Miles Davis, Coltrane, you know, soul and funk artists. It's about, for me, it's more about having the time to just sit through and listen to the parts of their catalogue that are not as celebrated, but are likely as good.
For me, I think bucket list of movies, I don't really have one. And
you ask me the question and then you don't have one yourself.
I don't have one, and the same for music, but I think it was important for me to ask you because I thought you might have one.
Well, but the thing with music is it's so easy to get a hold of music now.
It is, yeah.
It's so easy to get a hold of music. I mean, even if I want to just buy it, it's cheaper to buy than ever. Music, it's not like, oh my God, there's that, you know, album that I've always wanted. It's more, you know, what's that thing that I don't even know about that someone might put me up and I'll stumble across? And I don't know until that happens. But with film, I just can't pull it out of my head right now. I just can't. I know that I'm long overdue spending a lot more time with film for leisure purposes, for artistic inspiration. I think, you know, the more time that I spend around people like George and Jodie, like Jodie is also an actor. He loves film and theatre. You know, George is a director and a filmmaker and a storyteller. Like, I'll get more into it. But going back to yourself and like bucket list or the lack thereof.
So I think what I love to do, one of my love languages with people and in friendships, I love to send music to people.
Were you that guy who made people compilation CDs and mixtapes?
Yeah, I still do.
That was my thing. I would make people compilation tapes, CD, and obviously now playlists I make for people. Yeah. Love sharing things with people. But
this is something that I wanted to put out and probably make a regular segment on my episodes, but like recommendations. So I would recommend like Robin Hackett, Hard Left is a really good song. 40 Foot Echo, Five for Fighting. These are like bands and artists that people don't know that I listen to, because everyone knows me for listening to like 80s music, grime and rap, but I listen to everything in between, mellow rock. I don't know what to call it, grunge, rock. I don't know, Van Halen.
For the record, Van Halen's Jump is a tune.
Queen, I listen to Queen and ABBA. Come on.
Queen I love. ABBA definitely have their moments. No, ABBA don't. Yeah. ABBA are great.
They did this thing. I think they kind of made it popular. Like if you just look at the recording process of most of ABBA songs, the way they pan their vocals and they get that classic ABBA harmony going on in their tracks, I think they were probably one of the first, or if not, to popularize that kind of technique in recording. So the reason why ABBA do so well is because of that technique, and people use it to this day.
So that's some music you want to recommend?
Rags Original, Eliza, who formerly Eliza Doolittle, Liana La Havas.
Liana La Havas.
I bought her first two albums.
I actually need to pick up her first two albums are wonderful.
Yeah. And
I was very lucky enough. I actually got to see her. Is it Kokoro or something? What's the Coco? In Camden?
Yeah.
I saw her live there last year. I didn't even have to pay for it. I had a friend that had a spare ticket. Literally, he DM'd me on Instagram. He's normally in Dundee, and he just, like, without telling people, he'd come back down to London. And he's like, "Do you like Liana Havas? You free tonight?" And I was like, "Yes to both." He's like, "Right, got a ticket." And I was like, "Yes."
There's other people like Jessie Ware, Emily Sandé. Like, these are really great artists that I've loved, that probably aren't as big as I thought that they should be. Because I think Emily Sandé came out around the time Sam Smith came out. And I think when Adele was dropping her either second or third album.
What do you think that's down to?
I think it's down to, because of her being an artist of colour.
And a woman.
And a woman as well.
See, for my generation, we feel similarly.
Yeah.
Those of us, some of us who are, see the world in a particular way on sort of race. And we always bring up the comparison between Jamiroquai and Omar.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Love Jamiroquai. So I'm not here to put him down.
No, I listen to some Jamiroquai.
But someone like Omar, the fact that over the decades he's kept putting, and stuff is world class.
Yeah.
And you've got to remember, you know, people like Common, you know, they've all worked with him. Like across the pond in the States, they recognise his greatness. And I feel...
I mean, obviously, when you go to certain parts of London, there's going to be like artists of that caliber that are not as known, that are just banging those. Like, I mean, Craig David bangs differently in the UK than it does in America. Like Craig David's just one of those guys. But when you talk about artists like Omar, talking about Shola Amar, like certain parts of London, like those are strong names. And yeah, like it's a shame.
But those are some great musical recommendations that you've given.
Sure. Definitely listen to Jessie Ware's version of Do for Love by Bobby Caldwell.
Mm-hmm. I love the original by Bobby Caldwell.
Yeah.
And Tupac also sampled it.
Exactly. And also she did a cover of Brownstone's
If You Want Me.
Yeah.
It'd be really hard for me to listen because that... it's just the original's a great one.
Yeah, I mean, I Brownstone, like, If You Want Me, I listen. There's an a cappella version on YouTube with the video, and it bangs just as well as the one without the instrumental.
Of course it will.
I love music. Music is therapy just as well as writing is. But to have just music just wash over you, and basically with the use of headphones and you know, mobile devices, you can have these moments on a train, on a bus. You
can. I think one of the things that is lost
is just being in a solitary place and just...
Yeah, being in a solitary place and having some proper speakers, having an amp and listening to it like that. I'm someone who doesn't do it the way I used to. I'm looking to change that this year and next. Like I'm saving up to invest in some stuff, and I actually want to try and carve out, because that's one of the things that's one of the things that became very clear to me. Not just earlier in January, but then also I was in a workshop led by a business coach about setting business goals for 2023, and she talked about the power of intentionality, of like setting an intention. And I think just life is so full of internet, technology, constant demands for your attention, distractions, regardless of whether you have ADHD or not. For me, it's just further compounded. And I'm starting to learn that I need to just intentionally set out time, sit down, listen to a bit of vinyl, or not even vinyl, just sit and listen to music. Like one of the things I started doing, and I've fallen off and I need to do it again, was to try and carve out time even once a week.
I used to do that.
So I did that. I went for a walk somewhere towards the end of last year in South Bank late at night, and I just put on Outlast Equemini from beginning to end, and I was just like, it felt like eating a really good meal, not fast food.
Yeah.
I felt like someone had brought out the starters, took my time, I was talking to an intimate friend, then the main course, then there was dessert, tea to wash it down. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It washes over you. It's therapy. But I also think that one of the things that we are losing is intentionality. And Kay Tempest says it in their book. I actually can't remember. It's a book on creativity. I think it's On Connection is what it's called. And Kay makes a really good point of the fact that people are not intentionally connecting with music always in the same way. It's like, all right, you know, let's have the chill playlist on for like when I'm studying, or let's have the other playlist on for when I'm cooking.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have, and I think with all art, I think music, it's become very acceptable. Like it's been devalued a little bit and commoditized, and you know, just throw this playlist on and have it in the background as opposed to really sitting and enjoying it. Even when you made a compilation tape or a compilation on a mini disc, it still took a certain amount of time to create it.
Yeah,
there was a certain amount of friction. But otherwise, you know, if you had a Discman, there's only so many CDs. I mean, you could probably carry, you know, a little pack and some sleeves, but you still had to change it.
Yeah.
You were like forced to listen. And I actually get why people like Jay-Z were really militant on saying, no, I'm not going to sell individual songs buy the album or nothing. It's supposed to be listened to in a certain way. And I think technology's removed friction and it's made everything a little too easy, and it's kind of devalued things a little bit as well. I think there's trade-offs and double-edged swords that come with all of the advances with technology. So yeah, it's altered how we approach music.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you've got platforms like Spotify, you don't really own your music now. Like you're renting your music monthly.
Yeah, but not everything. But not everything that's been put out is always available.
That's true.
We're only reaching a point. Like we're recording today on February the 3rd.
Yeah.
2023. It's come next month. I think March 3rd. It's going to be the first time that De La Soul's catalogue is finally available.
I don't even know if Aaliyah's catalogue is available right now. Is it? Maybe just on Tidal.
Yeah, I think my challenge with the streaming model is you're not as in control as what you're actually led to believe and what you can access and enjoy and experience. But also at the same time, I think algorithms can often create an echo chamber of you listening to the same stuff. Like I've been through this experience where I've found myself almost tunneled into a certain place musically, and then going back to my phone where I've got everything like, gigabytes and gigabytes, like thousands of songs that I've bought and I've actually ripped onto there. And I found that there was just, all of a sudden, there was a much greater diversity in what I was listening to.
Yeah.
Because what's on my phone is a byproduct of the fact that I was buying music long before the streaming. And even now, people think I'm hardcore. I still buy music. The Little Sims album, I bought it. I still buy stuff to support. But also, I might not always have access to Wi-Fi. Like I've been in instances, whether I'm traveling or on certain public transport, and it's awful. I want to have music. If we've got the promise of technology, then it needs to make good on it, which is then to have access to stuff.
Also, what I don't like about the streaming model is that, if you can't find a song on there, you'll probably find it on YouTube. But also, you being as a rap fan, a hip hop fan, mixtapes. We're talking about, things where artists sample other things. Like, so one of my favorite mixtape trilogies is Fabulous's Soul Tapes, and obviously because
but due to sample clearance issue, you can't put things, you can't even stream them because there's a lawsuit happening.
But from back in the CD days, you could just get a CD and just listen to that.
But the bootleg era, like you would have certain types of bootlegs, even within hip hop, like white label bootlegs. Just things like I remember being at No Long Ting, which is a night that Ty, rest in peace, from Brixton, he used to curate along with Cindy and Christian of Hanson Family. And I remember DJ Pogo, who's a legendary hip hop DJ, and now he's sort of moved to Brazil and is having a quieter life there. But he literally jumped on the mic and addressed me while he was playing tunes, because I was like having my phone up in the air, and he's like, bruv, you're not going to find this on Shazam.
That's true, probably true.
Yeah, so I think technology's impacted things in that way. To be honest, I think there's a whole nother podcast that we can do about talking about the impact of technology, the opportunities it's created, but the challenges through devaluation of, potentially devaluing of art, depending on where you sit in your interpretation of that.
Yeah, for sure.
That's something that we can sort of talk about. But I think one of the things that what I would love to end on today is if we talk, if one of the themes for today has been our love of curating, let's end on curation. Let's talk about whether it's film, TV, music, or a little bit of all. Let's squeeze in. Like, talk to me about some things that if people are going to even just take away one thing from this podcast and it's the recommendations, what would you recommend? What would you want to squeeze in?
For sure. So I've been writing down artists that I think people should listen to. Quadrant is a really good group. they're not that well known, but they're more famous for probably Drake sampled Quadrant on Lemon Pepper Freestyle.
Okay.
But they've got one track with Kendrick Lamar on their album. One of my favorite songs on there is Your Favorite Star, LFT. And yeah, like the singer's just got this nice tone to her. Another one would be Mary Dahlstrom. She's a singer. I don't know what to put her in terms of category, but maybe soul, R&B. She's got this song out that just came out. I'm going to play it to you after the podcast. And then Q, he's had a couple songs on like some Netflix shows, but he's a really good soul R&B artist, singer. And Far, FARR. They have a really cool cover of Bulletproof by LaRue that you need to listen to. And then I'm going to plug Don McLean, probably one of my favorite artists when growing up, one of my dad's favorite artists as well, in terms of like, you know, that kind of country music type of vibe. It might not be your cup of tea, but you might understand me more. And how I go about writing. He's more famous for American Pie, which Madonna covered, and Vincent, which is about Vincent van Gogh.
Okay.
You might have heard Vincent.
Okay. Anything else you want to recommend?
I could.
As we sort of winding down time-wise.
I could, but...
Do you want to jump out into other art forms before we switch over and I curate a few things?
Actually, let me go into another thing, actually. One of my favourite places to go for experiencing art is the Saatchi Gallery. They're doing something on graffiti at the moment. So if you're watching this, it might still be there, but if not, just go to the Saatchi Gallery. They're always doing something cool, and it's free, and the Design Museum too.
I'm always going to plug the hip-hop artist Ty, T-Y.
Yeah, for sure.
I think he was massively underrated and slept on in his life. He's got a few albums. His debut, Awkward, is great. The follow-up, Upwards, is great. Closer is the third album. Special Kind of Fool is the fourth. The fifth album is A Work of Hearts, which was his final album before he passed away. Great albums. In terms of other stuff that I'm really, really enjoying, I think Loyal Kana is incredible.
Oh my God, I love Loyal Kana.
You know, he's got 3 albums. He's great.
Yeah,
I mean, some of the things I recommend are a bit more obvious. I think Kendrick Lamar has been knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, I think everyone knows about Kendrick Lamar.
So he's definitely someone to check out. In terms of sometimes older stuff, I think everyone should listen to the Black Star album, Mos Def and Talib Kweli at Black Star. Great MCing, great lyricism. In terms of newer music, Blue Lab Beats, which comprise of NKOK and David and Rapcore. I mean, you have to listen to them. They've got some incredible tunes. The tune that you have to check out is Pineapple.
Yeah.
And then there's one that ties into actually a bucket list movie I haven't seen that I want to watch. I want to watch Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence.
Oh my God. David Bowie is in that.
Yeah.
So you're going to remember one of the songs from that film is that kind of like Japanese autumn, wintry type of instrumental that everyone hears.
So basically...
Yeah,
I can't play it because on the podcast, but the title track, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, with Ryuichi Sakamoto on the piano.
I used to bang that.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that, I mean, generally, there are certain producers or composers that I love. Obviously, Ryuichi Sakamoto, it's just this one tune that I'm obsessed with. But Joe Hisashi, he scored a lot of Hayao Miyazaki's films for Studio Ghibli.
Yeah,
he's an incredible composer. He also composed Summer for a Japanese movie called Kikujuro that was, I think, directed by Takashi Kitano, who's a legendary Japanese artist, like comedian, TV show host, actor, director, writer, everything. Yeah. In terms of other producers, obvious ones, you know, anything by Quincy Jones is great. Jay Dilla is great. Yeah. R.D. Burman, who's an Indian producer, who I think is on par with like modern day producers and composers like A.R. Rahman.
I was gonna say nothing's. I can't pronounce his name properly.
Nitin Sawhney.
Nitin Sawhney.
I grew up
love
on
it.
his. Check out his music. He's great. Little Sims is someone who I just think can do no wrong right now as a music artist. There's.
I was gonna say Cleo Salt as well.
Cleo Salt. I agree with that.
Mother's a wonderful album.
It's a great album. Chidi Digital is a great producer. Disclosure, I know him personally. I'm going to be working with him. I think it's important to, disclose some of these things where there might be biases. There's a producer called Solaheen who makes great beats. There's a lot of great music, and I don't have the time to squeeze it all in. If we're talking about stuff like storytelling, obviously films, I love Everything Everywhere All at Once. Donnie Darko is a great movie from back in the day. Really, really worth watching. In terms of other movies, I loved Barry Jenkins' Moonlight. That really, really spoke to me as an outsider. What else? Like TV shows wise, man. I think Atlanta is incredible by Donald Glover.
That's probably on my bucket list of things to watch.
The Wire was incredible. I'm currently rewatching 6 Feet Under, which you can get on like Now TV. It was a TV show set 2005.
Funeral home.
Yeah, it's set in the funeral home. It's incredible writing, incredible storytelling. I'm sure we'll be on the podcast again, and I'll probably prepare a little bit better. Other stuff coming out of like Southeast Asia, movie-wise. There's a movie on Netflix called Us and Them, directed by a director called Renee Liu. She's a great director, starring an actress called Jo Dongyu. That's spelled as ZHOU and then DONGYU. She was also in a movie called Better Days, which starred another actress, Jo Yeoh, which is ZHOU and then YE. I think there's
loads. We could go.
There's definitely. I think we're going to sit down, you and me individually, with each other, and we'll probably get some of our friends as well, and we'll sit and just talk about film and TV. But there's so much
for sure. And also, I want to say Japanese producer who passed away a few years ago, Nujabes, was actually really good.
Nujabes is great. Very hip hop influenced.
Yeah, my friend Joe used to talk about him a lot, and awesome producer. But that's before we end the podcast. Let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me. I'm on Twitter, and my handle is at Haroon Creates, HAROON Creates. Not as active there. I've got the same handle, Haroon Creates, HAROON Creates. On Instagram, I'm far more active there. You can find me there. There's other things, the podcast you'll find me at. I think on Instagram, the handle is Speak Easy with Haroon. So Speak Easy with, and then HAROON, and that's all one word, Speak Easy with Haroon. In terms of what you can look forward to from me, like stuff that's absolutely guaranteed, I think podcasting is this wonderful world that I'm looking to just lose myself in more and more.
Definitely. I'm enjoying it.
Hopefully I'm looking to perform more on stage with poetry. I definitely will have my first book out this year. But also, even once that's done, you may not have to wait so long. I'm looking to put a couple of more poetry releases in print out not too long after that. I think I'm finding myself very influenced by Rick Rubin at the moment, and I'm reading his new book. But he's just big on, especially in this era where there's just the cost of production and sharing is less.
Yeah,
I'm looking to make more things, put more things out, more poetry. Where my beat making, music making journey goes, I hope it progresses. I think I'm still finding my feet in that, in a way that, I've overcome a lot of those hurdles and challenges. already in things like poetry, and I'm finding my way in podcasting now. So yeah, 2023, you're going to see a lot more stuff from me. And yeah, I hope that the things that I create and that I share sort of impact you positively, whether it's brighten up your day, make you look at something or think of something in a way that you didn't before. And it just adds to your life. I think that's really what I want to do as an artist, is it's that balance of doing things for myself, because it's just, I'm a much more happier and more functional person when I make art. But also it is important for it to impact other people positively, because, you know, you want to make positive contributions out there with the very limited and finite time that we have.
Yeah.
And throwing it back to you, where can people find you, Meta, and what can we look forward to from you in 2023?
So 2023, Window to the Spirits. The first Sunday of every month. I got given 3 more dates, so expect announcements for headliners. I don't know whether to break one of the headliners now.
Do it, because I've got some things I need to break that I forgot to mention after this.
I mean, it'll probably happen by then, or it might be even announced already. But if you're watching this, Nomadic will be announced as a headliner for May.
Okay.
And it's going to be a little bit different. So basically, with the 3 extra dates, it's going to be an evening with Nomadic Libar, which means their headline set will be longer. It will be 45, 50 minutes. So experience. Because I wanted to pick.
That's unheard of.
Yeah, you know me, I'm always trying to push the envelope. So I'm basically doing with the last.
Sounds like trying and succeeding.
Thank you so much. So with the last 3 dates, I wanted to do an evening with type of windows. So obviously give poets, the headliners, a lot more time. But also I'm picking poets that are able to fill that time with their art. So I know Nomadic has so much content to share, and this is the best way to do it for him to express himself in the fullest. And I'm looking to get other headliners that do the same. And also you can find me Instagram and YouTube at themetaphorest. That's the metaphor with a PH, EST at the end. And from there you can find everything else from me. But yeah, just more poetry, more videos.
Also mention Poetry and Shubs.
Oh, for sure. Poetry and Shubs is a poetry event with Haroon as our DJ. He'll be spinning tunes after the open mic set, which is only for 2 hours. It's a poet's poetry event. So basically 2 hours of poetry, and then you can just chill and catch up with your favorites.
And the next one is in March, which will also be celebrating the birthday of you and the other co-founder, Teddy the Protector.
Shout out to Teddy. It probably would have happened by now, because this has probably come out after March. But yeah. Me and Teddy.
In which case, you missed out.
You missed out. But yeah, me and Teddy will be holding Poetry and Shubs every 2 to 3 months. But obviously, at this moment in time, we're still trying to lock down venue and dates. Yeah. So watch this space.
Yeah, and I think for me, I'll continue to DJ for Poetry and Shubs. I'm DJing for BYOB, which is where I started out my poetry career. Yeah. My DJing career. But also, I've recently joined the Lunar Legacy team. So I'm their DJ for Future Flex, which is the last Wednesday of every month in Shoreditch currently. And I'm also, it's tonight when we're recording, but it'll be long in the past by the time this comes out. Cage. It looks like I'm also joining as the DJ for Jay Cage for his event Cage and Colours, where it's very much a sort of sip and paint type event, because he's very into his art. And obviously I'll be spinning a lot of tunes there as well.
It's been great talking to you, Haroon. Thank you.
It's been really good talking to you as well. And I want us to do this again at some point before the end of the year. Yeah, maybe we can wrap up the year together.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be a very fun year of podcasting, and this won't be your last time, obviously, on the podcast. You're essentially like the second host, I guess, or guest host anyway. But yeah. Thanks, guys, for watching, and make sure you follow us on all social channels.
Take care, and thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye. Love that shit.
That was lit.
That was lit, son. Oh god, that's so sick.